For being here. My name is Dr. Liz Sharda. I'm a professor of social work here at Hope and one of the faculty advisors for Students Demand Action. So Students Demand Action is a new student group this year. The full name is Students Demand Action for Gun Sense, and we are the Hope College chapter of a national organization, Students Demand Action. So we are connected to a larger network, which is also connected to the organization Moms Demand Action. So we're part of a larger movement here tonight, even as we're hearing some very particular and personal stories. So we've been planning this event since last fall when we were just starting out as an organization. And we had it scheduled for last week, which, as you all know, we had to reschedule it. But we've been planning this for months, and it took on a new significance on February 13th when a mass shooting took place on the campus of Michigan State University. So in light of the recent tragedy at Michigan State, we thought about how we, number one, how important stories are and how important these stories are and how important activism is. And so we were very glad to have this event planned for our community. And we also thought that we wanted to start in a bit of a different way tonight in light of that. And so we're just going to ask you all to take a moment of silence and remember the MSU community, the victims, and specifically Brian Fraser, Alexandria Verner, and Ariel Anderson. And so I'm going to just give us 30 seconds of space to remember them. So please join me in that. Thank you. So our hope for this evening is that you will hear our panelists' stories of activism birthed out of tragedy and be spurred on in your own activism, whatever that looks like. And we'll have lots of ideas from our panelists, from our Students Demand Action leadership. We've got some resources here for you. There's a handout on the table in the back with some QR codes with resources, and our SDA president will be talking about some very specific opportunities on campus coming up in the next couple months. Two more things. One, Emma. Hi, Emma. Emma has some index cards, and if you did not grab one from the table when you came in, it was kind of out of the way there. We would like you to ask questions of our panelists. We're not going to be able to get to all of them, and so we want you to invite you to write your question down on an index card, and Emma and I will come around in a few minutes while our panelists are sharing and collect those cards. So if you didn't get one of those, raise your hand. Emma will come around, and we'd love to hear your questions. All right. With that, I'm going to hand the mic over to my co-faculty advisor of Students Demand Action, Casey Stevens.
Thank you and welcome. We are, as Professor Sharda said, we've been planning this for several months, and so we're grateful that you would take the time and the commitment to be willing to learn and think with us and hear story. One of our goals for this evening is not only that you would learn stories of activism, but also that you would see the humanity of both activism, but also the realities of lives touched. by this issue. So thank you for creating space for that and being here with us tonight. As Professor Sharda shared, my name is Casey Stevens. I am going to be the moderator of this evening's event. And so in just a moment, I will take my seat and invite our panelists to introduce themselves. I'm going to ask them to share their name, the organization that they're affiliated with, or how they're connected to this topic here locally in Holland. And then I've also asked them to share just one thing, even though we're on the cusp of spring. I'm told we're supposed to get between 10 and 20 inches of snow tomorrow, so we will, so possibly another snow day. I've also asked them to share something that brings them joy during the winter months. And that was a specific, like a strategic question, because I think sometimes in the midst of this work, we forget to seek our own joy and to be fully human. And so I placed that question there intentionally. So I'll do that myself. Casey Stevens, as I mentioned, at Hope College, I am Associate Dean of Integrative Learning, as well as Director of the Phelps Scholars Program. And one thing that I do to bring me joy during the winter months is, frankly, I find really good television shows to watch and very good music to listen to. So I just finished Stranger Things, and I've been listening to pretty much only Taylor Swift for the last month and a half. So that is how I've survived. Pastor Watt, I will let you start.
I can't beat that. Okay, so hello. My name is Pastor Willie Watt. I am the former executive director, but founder and creator of Escape Ministry on 32nd Street. It's a gang ministry. Also, I am the founder and creator of Lifeline Ministry, which is a ministry dealing with still gang kids and also homeless individuals in our community. What I like to do in the wintertime. Well, because I am a dedicated servant, what I love to do during the winter is, right now there's about 327 people sleeping in the woods here in Holland. I'm the pastor that goes around to check on them, make sure they got food, clothing, they're keeping warm, and making sure their children are okay. That's what I love doing during the winter months.
Good evening. My name is Tom Sura. I'm an associate professor of English here at Hope College and also the director of college writing. So do I have any English 113 fans out there? Yeah? Fantastic. Also, the Closter Center, if you've been there, as well as our writing across the curriculum efforts. So that's my role at the college. Boy, for joy during the winter months, I've really enjoyed watching some shows with the kids. Like some of their commentary for the shows just cracks me up. So it's a different experience trying to watch a show with a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old because they bring a lot of joy to all that stuff. So that's one thing I've really enjoyed this winter.
Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Schiller. I'm a freshman here at Hope studying business and political science. My role in SDA, I'm on the e-board and I'm the communications lead. And as for what I enjoy doing in the winter months, I'm a really big tea drinker. So I enjoy a good cup of hot tea pretty much every day in the winter.
Hi, I'm Rachel Wozniak. I'm a freshman here studying communications, and at SDA, I'm the membership lead. One thing I like to do during the winter months is watch movies.
Sweet. Thank you all for indulging that interest and curiosity of mine. So I have two questions prepared for our panelists, and then we would love to hear your questions. So we do hope that you will take that invitation to write those, and we will capture those from you, bring those from you, and have the chance to ask those of our panelists as well. So the first question that I have for them is I've asked them to take a few moments to tell us what makes the issue of gun violence important. Please take a few minutes to tell us what makes the issue of gun violence important to you personally, in your story of becoming involved in gun violence activism.
On November 30th, 2021, a mass shooting at Oxford High School took the lives of 4 students: Hannah St. Juliana, Madison Baldwin, Tate Meir, and Justin Schilling. 6 students and 1 teacher were injured, and nearly 1,800 students were left traumatized.
We are both survivors of the Oxford High School shooting. The day passed in a blur. I remember rushing out of my house that morning before school, quickly hugging my parents goodbye. I remember sitting in my history class next to Justin, unaware that it would be the last time I would see or joke around with him. I remember the sound of gunshots echoing through the halls and my teacher slamming the door shut. I remember frantically pushing desks towards the door for a barricade as my classmates screamed and cried. I remember texting my mom, "I love you," and her begging me for information when I had none to give. I remember praying my brother was alive in the classroom 2 doors down from me. I remember a stapler being shoved into my hand to use like a weapon as a bullet went through my classroom door. I remember finally getting out of the school and desperately trying to find my mom or dad as ambulances whipped past me and helicopters flew overhead. Worst of all, I remember waiting for news, waiting for names. Tate, Hannah, Madison, Justin. My heart broke every time.
The day went by as it normally would. Time was ticking by, work was being procrastinated, and I was laughing with my friends. Before 5th hour, my friends and I split up in the hallway. We said our normal "see you laters" and "I'll text yous." I sat down in my class and got situated, and the next thing I knew, gunshots rang in the distance. I remember hearing the screaming. I remember running through the hall. I remember pushing through the glass doors and meeting the cold wind. I remember stopping a few steps out of the door. My brother. I frantically checked my phone. I saw a text from him. He was in a classroom and he was safe. I ran to a family member's house nearby. I felt helpless. As the hours ticked by, I sat glued to the TV. News channels broadcasted people injured. Was it 1, 10, 20? How many people died? 0, 5, 10? No one knew. We waited and waited for the dreaded texts and calls to come through. 4 children had died: Madison, Tate, Hannah, and Justin. From that moment on, I knew that my life, my community, and my world would never be the same.
In the weeks following the shooting, we felt lost. We couldn't eat, we couldn't sleep, we couldn't laugh, and yet every day we had to pretend like we were okay.
After 42 nearly sleepless nights, we returned to a school environment with classmates and teachers. The day was filled with hugs, therapy dogs, and lots of anxiety.
Going to school became physically and emotionally exhausting. Every day we put on a brave face for our little brothers. Every day we had to go to school knowing that 4 students never would again.
Every day we had to stare at the empty desk next to us in history class that Justin sat at. Every day we woke up, went to school, and we were terrified that it would happen again.
The days passed slowly and I was restless. I wanted to do something that would help me move forward and process what I'd experienced. My government teacher, Ms. Jasinski, urged my best friend and me to use our anger to fight for change. At first I was confused. How could I do anything? She told us about an organization called March for Our Lives that was organizing a lobby group to convince legislators to pass laws to help prevent mass shootings. We went to Lansing in February, just 85 days after the Oxford shooting, and lobbied for legislation. That day was one of the most pivotal moments of my life. It left such an impact on me that I knew that I had to continue advocating for change. Later that spring, I had the opportunity to lead a new group of lobbyists and met with even more representatives. Lobbying at the Capitol was not only an awakening from my involvement in activism against gun violence, but from my overall political involvement. It taught me that the only way that things are going to get done at a legislative level is that if we, as dutiful citizens, ask for it. Asking for change makes it personal. Telling your story makes it personal. We asked for safe gun storage and mental health services in schools. We cried, we yelled, we urged representatives and senators for change. It was hard and really scary. It reopened wounds that were not healed yet. Some representatives told us no, they wouldn't make a change. But some told us yes. Some promised to fight with us. And yet a year later, we still await that promise.
My experience after the shooting looked a little bit different. I did my fair amount of sulking, which was to be expected, and it seemed all I had energy for was going to school. My friends and I would talk about our stories and attempt to process what we had gone through. I could not bring myself to watch the news, and I couldn't watch any press conferences or court cases. It just felt like all they had to talk about was the gunman, and they blasted his picture, and that's just not what I needed to see. It was all too gruesome, and it felt even a little insensitive. In the last few months of my senior year, I had no emotional availability left for anything else. It wasn't until the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, that I realized I needed to put my pain to the side and do something. I could not sit back and watch more children be murdered in their schools.
In the year following the shooting, we've been fighting for change while simultaneously trying to heal ourselves. We're reminded every day of the issue of gun violence with headline after headline of a new mass shooting.
Most recently, we are faced with the tragedy that occurred at Michigan State. Many of our friends and classmates even go to Michigan State that went to Oxford with us. This is the second school shooting they have been through in the last 14 months. 14 months, 2 mass shootings. That's not normal. Yet again and again, we are met with thoughts and prayers. This is not enough. We need change.
In May, after our graduation, we were relieved. It was all over. We could go to college and leave behind the tragedy in Oxford. However, leaving our town and forgetting our past was harder than we could have imagined. Our brothers, our friends, our teammates were all still there. We still had a duty to fight for those that we left behind, and we still had a duty to fight for all of those affected by gun violence.
Natalie's sister, Lauren Schiller, laid the groundwork for a new student organization at Hope College called Students Demand Action last spring. SDA is an organization dedicated to preventing gun violence. We knew that this was something we wanted to be a part of. At home, everyone was so focused on the shooting, keeping the school safe and providing mental health services that the transition to a new school was shocking. No one really understood the trauma we faced, and there weren't the numbers of support that there were in Oxford. We joined SDA with the hopes of spreading awareness of gun violence to students at Hope College in order to gain traction for a movement towards preventative legislation.
Through our suffering, we realized the only way to get through our grief is to help others along the way. We challenge all of you to do the same. We ask that you use your life experiences and your struggles to find your purpose through activism.
So we decided to put a few ways that you all can get involved in the fight against gun violence. So the first, and in my opinion the easiest way, is definitely to join SDA. You can sign up for our email list and follow us on Instagram to keep up with all of our events and meetings we're going to have coming up.
The second thing that you can do is to contact your representatives. And on the pamphlet that you guys received, there's more information on how to do that. But we need to tell them what we want and what we need. This is no longer a partisan issue. It's not about parties. And make sure your representatives know that. Their jobs are at stake because we're voting them in, and we can just as easily vote them out if they don't support gun legislation. Tell them that in your email. Tell them your story, why this is important to you.
And the last thing is to stay up to date on current events. And when we share information about these current events, it's important that we remember no notoriety, meaning that we don't give attention to the perpetrators of these crimes. So when you're sharing information about it, please consider just sharing information about the lives that were lost in each event.
I think we should give them a rousing ovation. Thank you both. So, my story is a little different. I'm still relatively new to Hope College. I came to the college in January of 2021 after working for about 10 years in Morgantown, West Virginia. Gun violence has been something that has occupied my mind for a long time, because I was 21 years old and in college when the mass shooting at Columbine High School took place. It's over 20 years ago. And here we are tonight. It wasn't until like 20 years later that I actually became involved in trying to do something. I was at a faculty meeting in West Virginia when a colleague announced that in the next legislative session, the state's government would pass a bill that would remove the school's ability, or the ability of public colleges and universities, to ban firearms from campus. I didn't know what to do, but I knew that I wanted to express something about how I thought this was just a bad idea. I wanted to express something about my skepticism that more guns would somehow equal more safety, especially guns in classrooms, offices, and dormitories. So I did a very English professor thing to do. I wrote an email. That email ended up connecting me with other like-minded people who wanted to express their concern that this was a bad idea. It turned out there were a lot of people who felt the same way. So we did more writing and calling and visiting the Capitol in Charleston. We connected with allies like Moms Demand Action and Students Demand Action. And as our collective grew, we even dreamed up this hashtag, hashtag #OneCampus, with the O capitalized and the C capitalized, to try to unite everybody in West Virginia around the idea that we're all one campus, and nobody who's affected by this wants this legislation. In the end, we stopped it. It didn't pass. But the thing is, and it's bizarre for me, tonight's event, because yesterday, I don't know how closely you follow the news, especially the news out of West Virginia. Yesterday, March 1st, 2023, 4 years after defeating this legislation, it passed the House, it passed the Senate, and the governor of West Virginia made a big display of signing this into law. The new reality in West Virginia is that in the fall of 2024, people with concealed weapons permits will be able to bring those firearms into classrooms, offices, and dormitories. This is what brings me here tonight, to work with these wonderful people.
Well, how did I get involved in this? So, I have to take you back to back in the 60s. Once again, my name is Pastor Willie Watt. I am from Chicago, Illinois. I am from the west side of Chicago, a place called K-Town. Killer K-Town if you lived in Chicago. I see somebody shaking their head, so you might know this then. My cousin is Larry Hoover. Yes, Larry Hoover started the Black Gangster Disciples, and my father was his assassin. And for you, those who don't know about the Black Gangster Disciples, just think about the Bloods and the Crips, and over millions of young men dying yearly from gang violence. Well, that's the legacy that I come from. So I grew up in a very violent household and a very violent community. I was shot 3 times before the age of 11. I joined the gang at 11 to be able to survive. I joined the gang and I had to shoot individuals just to get to school sometimes. I never killed anyone because maybe that was because my mom took me to church every Sunday, and I was told that if you kill, you go to hell. And so that was one of the things that kept me from killing people, but I also got punished for not killing individuals. So the more that I didn't do it, the more I got beat by the very gang that told me that they cared for me and loved me. When I was 13 years old, my best friend and me and him got caught on the railroad on the L, and they pushed him in front of a train right in front of me, a rival gang. So I watched my best friend body get ripped apart. The trauma experience from that, that night, my mom and her boyfriend moved us out of Chicago, Illinois that night at 2 o'clock in the morning and moved us to Dowagiac, Michigan. If y'all don't know about Dowagiac, it's a total culture shock for me. So here's this gang kid coming from an all-black community now into an all-white community. And so at the time, I didn't know how to associate. I did football and basketball and everything I could, but my anger from the violence and the trauma from the death kept coming back. So every scholarship I ever had to play football, I ended up gravitating more to the streets. It got too bad for me to be in Dowagiac, and so in 1985, my mom and stepdad said, "You got to leave. Where you want to go?" And I said, "Well, I know some people in Holland." So I moved to Holland in 1985, a 17-year-old kid. I lived right at the Temple building, right on the top floor, worked at Burger King that used to be on A Street, but yet still finding people who was in gangs here. In 1991, Holland had the biggest gang problem because they had individuals they brought in from, churches brought in Asian individuals from California that was gang related, and African Americans from Bangor, Benton Harbor, St. Joe were gang members. And then so the Latino community here had to get together and join forces, and that's when the Latin Kings were born here in Holland. I moved away in 91. There were so many shootings and killings here in Holland around that time, from 91 to 98. I ended up moving back in 98, and I found out that right down the street on College, they was burning out all the black families. And so here's a black family moves in. But because I knew all the people here at the time, and I was still gang related, and in some cases, my house was never touched. Fast forward with all the gang stuff there in 2006, because of my craziness and the way my life was, I wasn't a good husband, a good father, good nothing. I was homeless, found myself looking at 25 years in jail, and ended up being homeless in the back parking lot of Christ Memorial Church. Some people took me in and trained me and told me who I was in Christ, and my life took off. The first thing I wanted to do was go after people that were like me, that's been lied to and told one thing and find out it's something totally different. So I went after kids. I started Escape Ministry to go directly after gang kids. I had a plan. I told the city, while the killings was going on and the shootings, that if you let me put a summer job program together and put all the gang kids working, they wouldn't shoot each other and kill each other. Well, after several more deaths, they decided that they was going to put that plan in action in 2013. So I took two rival gangs, put them together, and had them working together, and the juvenile crime rate in Holland dropped 76%. But this is Holland, so every time something good goes on, they think that it's okay, and then they can stop what we're doing. So 3 years later, after still being safe here, they decided that they didn't want to do the program anymore. And also, my own ministry decided that they didn't want to work with gang kids anymore. Well, understand this. There are 347 gang members in Holland. There are 7 gangs. I have the largest gang relocation program in the state of Michigan. I have gotten over 700 kids out of gangs in the Ottawa County area. How many guns you think out of that 700 that I collected? 622. I can go right down the street right now and buy a gun for $15. A 22. A 9mm right now costs $125. And that's 3 blocks from here. I work with homeless people now. And some of those homeless individuals actually have mental illness. And several of them carry guns. How many car break-ins do you have here on campus? Because a lot of homeless people break into the cars. How long do you think it's going to take before they start robbing people? Matter of fact, how many shootings have you heard about in Holland since this year? You probably heard of 7. Well, there's been 32. Because Holland wants you to believe that it is safe to stay here, and it's not. This is a dangerous town. Meth is one of the leading drugs here. So I got involved a lot more when one of my kids at Escape ended up bringing in, you notice that these ray guns don't have to have the red tips anymore? So he brought in this gun. It was a pellet gun, and I swear it looked just like a real gun. And I'm like, what are you doing with this? Little did I know that he actually waved that gun 2 nights before at a park at some Latin Kings. This is a African-American individual. His name was T.J. Wells. Well, T.J. waved that gun in front of those kids, which was fake, but they thought it was real. And then a week later, shot him at the hotel on the north side of town with I can't even say the name, AR-15, 2 of them. He was killed. And he was killed on my watch. And I think about that every single day. So my job right now is to go out there and get kids that have these guns and these kids that want to get out of gangs, and I totally relocate them out of state. I have 8 safe houses around the United States. I change their identities. And I have military veterans right now. I have college individuals. I have kids who have kids and married, not living the lie that was told to them to carry a gun and think that it's okay. So I am very, very passionate about the work I do because I'm taking this work from the bottom up. I know there's a lot of individuals that work from the top down. They go to legislation and do a lot of work, but sometimes when it gets all the way down to those individuals, they never see the change. So I have to go where the change could be made immediately to the individuals that's holding and carrying the guns and explain to them why they don't need it. Make them feel safe from their parents and from people in the community that they feel is going to kill them. Changing minds.
Thank you to each of you for sharing your stories. We do appreciate that. Emma, are you collecting? So Emma over here is collecting cards. If you do have questions, I'm going to ask one more question of our panelists, and then it'll be open up to your questions. So we have one mic, so I'm going to ask Pastor Watt and Dr. Sura, both of you, your question, and then I'll pass the mic down so that you can just bounce off of each other. So, Pastor Watt, I was wondering what suggestions you have. So, kind of flipping the script this time. What suggestions you have for individuals becoming more involved in community-based local activism, or in raising their awareness of the opportunity for addressing this issue locally. And Dr. Sura, you've incorporated activism into your work as a scholar and as a writer. What have you learned about incorporating activism into vocation that you would like to share with the audience?
I'm a strong believer in working from the bottom up. strong believer because I just had the most interesting conversation just about this meeting that I'm in right now. Our gun activists telling me, giving me statistics why people should be having guns and everything. And every time you talk to somebody about guns, I call it the chicken and the egg conversation. Do you understand what I'm talking about? The chicken, they claim, well, you want to take our guns from us, and I'm like, no, we just want to keep crazy people from being able to get them. But the argument always turned to taking something away from me. No, it's making it safe so individuals who don't need it to have them, they don't get them. When it comes to activism, I say you have to do it. So here's one scary thing for me right now. I just gave you a number of 327 individuals homeless in Holland. Those are actually people living on the street and have no income. Out of that number, about 40% of them deal with mental illness. Now, you living in a community that don't even want to recognize that that's a problem. A lot of people in here, and I just want to raise their hands, how many ever been without lights in their home for more than a week? Raise them up, raise it up. How many people ever been without food for more than a couple days? Who's ever slept in the street for more than a week? Now imagine having to do that with a family. Then the question becomes, what would you do to put food in your child's mouth? What lengths would you go to do something stupid thinking you're going to provide something good? Now throw mental illness on top of that. What is it going to take for somebody in this town dealing with mental illness to have a gun and think they'll just rob someone just walking down the street and it'll just be okay? But we live in a community that don't even want to recognize that there's even a problem. And there is. I spoke at Hope College, I think maybe 7 years ago, and I asked them, when you did your orientation, did they tell you not to go past 16th Street? I see some people laughing, but that means you heard about that, right? You heard not to travel certain spaces and places in here, in this community. And that's true in some cases. It is dangerous here. But we downplay that. There's 3 gang houses located in Holland that have sex trafficking going on. But no one does anything because we want to ignore it. Activism calls for you to do something. Move. The smallest things. And for me, it's going after the individuals. It's going after the homeless people that needs our help, finding spaces for them to be at, places to be at, so they won't, making sure they got food and money to do laundry and everything, so they're not robbing or doing anything else to anybody else to get it. That's easy to do. Very easy. Anyone in here can do that.
Thank you, Pastor Watt. I will just build on what Pastor Watt has said, because one of the things that was striking for me when I finally got off my butt and got involved in trying to do something was I would talk to students on campus, and they would say, what can we do? We're just students. Nobody's going to listen to us. The adults are going to do something, right? And then when I was in Charleston and talking to legislators, they would say, where are the students? We're doing this for them. It's about them. We're not worried about whining faculty, right? Where are the students? And so there was this interesting kind of disconnect where the students thought they didn't have any power, and the legislators were like, well, if the students say it, then maybe we'll listen, right? They didn't want to listen to us. And I also learned through this action that when it was starting, when we were just getting going, the conventional wisdom was, look, you can't do anything. It's inevitable. We don't have the votes. It's going to pass. And so what was striking to me was that we did it anyway. We at least wanted to be on the record that we disagreed. And then we stopped it. Because the bill moved through the House, it went to the Senate, and then because of this constant advocacy and this tireless work, 2 Republican senators changed their mind. And suddenly the bill died in committee. And just a few weeks before, that was impossible. It wasn't going to happen until it happened. And then I really got to thinking, because I as an English professor, I'm not a literary scholar now, I'm a rhetorician. I study rhetoric, right? And I thought, well, one of the most effective ways to convince somebody not to do anything is to tell them that it's hopeless, right? Like, why try if it's hopeless, if you can't win? And then when we won, I really started thinking, wait a minute. What else is hopeless that we can actually change? And all it takes is action, is doing something, is applying pressure, not letting it go away, not ignoring it. Keep bringing it to the foreground. Keep making people look at it. And I think we would all be surprised at what is actually possible when we do that action instead of being convinced that we don't have any power, that it's somebody else has got to take care of it. That's my bit.
Thank you. Dr. Sura's use of the word rhetorician is, did I get that right? Yeah, you did. Is why I'm always a little bit nervous every time I email an English professor. Our last question, and then we will field questions from you all. The last question is for Rachel and Natalie. And that is you all shared a little bit about your own experience and how that has led to your activism. I'm wondering if you would share a little bit about maybe ways that you've seen peers become involved in activism for themselves.
So Natalie and I were kind of talking about this, and a lot of the times when we see events happen, we get organizations founded from survivors of the event. So like, for example, our classmates from Oxford started No Future Without Today. There's kids from March for Our Lives who they went to the school in Parkland. And like March 4th, that is from the shooting in Highland Park, Illinois. And so it's kind of interesting to see that most of the young kids who are involved in this are survivors of mass shootings, which is something that we acknowledge their hard work and their courage, and we're very appreciative of it, but it's hard because we need more than just the survivors. We need other people to help out.
I think as survivors, while we're going through our grief, a lot of the pressure of fighting for change is kind of placed on the survivor's shoulders at the same time that we're trying to go through and heal. And I've noticed this a lot as I've came to college and like talking with my family who did not go to the high school. A lot of times they're a little bit hesitant to want to join in the fight just because they don't want to feel like they're overstepping or getting into waters that like belong to the survivors. I'll tell you right now, as a survivor, like we want your help. Like I promise you're not overstepping if you want to get involved in this issue. I think the more help, the better. And it feels very heavy, I think, on survivors at times. I think both of us, neither of us would really want to be here, giving this speech. We don't want to have to go through this, but it's necessary for someone to step up. So, yeah, get involved.
Yeah, and another thing that we see a lot is people post on social media about events that happen. And while that's great and it's really good to spread awareness, my friend Raina said once that representatives and senators, they don't follow you on Instagram. So they can't see that you're posting on your story angry. So it's important that we do the things like we kind of suggested: call, email, do what you can. It's really simple.
The first question that I have is simply, what is the biggest misconception people have about activism? So whether that's something you've learned from your own experience of becoming involved, wherever that might source from, what is the biggest misconception people have about activism? And so I will hand the mic to you, Rachel, and if you have a response, you may pass it along as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is kind of what Natalie said about people think they're overstepping. And one of my biggest things that we say this in meetings all the time, that Casey and Liz can attest to this, we can't wait for something bad to happen to someone you know or love. You can't wait for that to happen, and I think that is something that people often tend to wait to do, which is not the right thing. So I think that is probably one of the biggest misconceptions.
I think for me, the biggest misconception is that getting involved is hard. When I started lobbying, I had never lobbied before. I never talked to anyone of any great significance or importance. I've never talked to a senator. I went and I told them my story, and it was as simple as that. I stuttered a lot. It wasn't pretty, but it actually did make a difference. And I think that anyone can get involved regardless of any sort of experience that you do or don't have.
Pastor Watt.
I never thought I would be doing what I'm doing right now. Didn't have a clue. I just found something that I understood, and I just went for it. Just did something, and it was just really simple. The first kid I got out of the gangs, it was like, okay, let me find a place for you. Now I'm 700 kids later. And it was just that one kid just finding that one place for that individual. Also noticing that wherever you get involved, when it comes to gun violence you're going to find out that a lot of stuff ties into each other that I had no clue until I did something. When I started off with just dealing with kids and gangs, then I found out that a lot of gangs prey on kids who are homeless. Oh, there's the first thing. And then they give these kids drugs so they can own them, because they give them drugs and a gun to protect the drugs. And then the kid has to sell the drugs, but yet on the drugs at the same time. So he owes the gang member, and now they own him. So by tackling homelessness, you eliminate kids going into the gangs, eliminate guns being on the street. Also, it's like a holistic approach just by doing one thing. You can do a lot, and it's so easy. This group can get together and just fundraise for funds to get guns off the street. There's one town did a gun buyback program that took over 700 guns off the street, and that was done in Niles, Michigan. A small town, 700 guns, just by a buyback program. Yeah. Simple.
first thing I would say is what I said before. The biggest misconception about activism is that it doesn't do anything, that you don't have power, that it's not going to work. It's what's the point? The second thing I would say is that, especially as a novice activist, I thought activism was just like a lot of yelling. Like, I honestly, like, I was just like, I don't know, I don't think I'm an activist. I don't like to yell, right? But the more I kind of grew to understand, like, what we're talking about, it's really not a whole lot of yelling. It certainly doesn't have to be, right? Like, there are ways to participate and contribute and advocate. And we sometimes, like, we take that word and we're like, well, that means you're extreme if you're an activist, right? But if you're an advocate, maybe that's just like, I'm going to pay attention. And I think, I think I hear Pastor Bott suggesting too, it's not just about yelling, but it's about studying. It's about learning about an issue. It's about looking for the solutions that work and then pushing those solutions forward. And that's what we're talking about, right? So I think that's important to keep in mind too, is that, like, my misconception was like, it was far too kind of superficial and silly, really. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about real change and sustaining change and pushing forward solutions. And there's not just going to be one solution that happens overnight. It's like a long kind of concerted effort to make something happen. And that is possible.
This question says, begins with, individuals with mental health disorders are more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators. And then goes on to ask, what are ways that you have seen anti-gun violence activism as an extension of mental health advocacy?
I guess I can start really quick. I don't know a ton on this topic, so I'm sorry, but one of the things that we lobby for, along with safe gun storage, is mental health resources in schools, because it really does go hand in hand. If people don't have the support that they want, they're more likely to go down some dangerous paths. So that's one main thing that we fought for, and they were more inclined to listen to that too, because it seemed, I think, an easier issue for them to tackle.
How can I answer this question and for you guys to understand what I'm saying here? When you look at statistics like that, I always ask myself, where did they actually get those numbers from? Because I can tell you right now, any kid that gets shot, they're getting a gun so they can shoot back. So when violence is brought to some people, violence is given back. I've seen that my whole 56 years. So for a person that's dealing with mental illness, not to exert trauma on others. You ever heard the saying, hurt people hurt people? That's a true statement. I've seen it. So saying that, victims of gun violence I don't know, but I just know that in many cases, people who are dealing with mental illness, there's not a lot being done for mental illness in the communities, period, and government, period. They closed all the homes and houses that used to take in people with mental illness. Now they on the street. They're, one of the biggest houses for individuals used to be on 32nd Street. Had over 90 individuals dealing with mental illness, and they closed, and all those people went into the street. And I look and think, okay, why aren't we providing health care or programs for individuals that are totally struggling with this? Me and my assistant deal with a lot of people that come in with mental illness, and we're wondering, okay, they're struggling. And all it takes is a trigger to set one of them off. And it's a dangerous situation. It really is. It's something that we need to look at very seriously and look at providing, one of the things that I wanted to do in this community is I built huts for homeless people, and I wanted to, I had 89 acres of land that I wanted to put these huts on and have over 200-something people live in a space where rehab, mental illness, everything could be taken care of totally free for them. And I got blocked by the city for rezoning. I mean, they didn't take it seriously.
I would just add, listen for choices that aren't really choices. What I mean by that is if you listen to the rhetoric of people talking about the issue, you might hear, well, the choice is either gun control or mental health, right? Like those are the only two options, A or B, right? And in the realm of politics, that's how candidates differentiate themselves from each other. And it leads us to think, well, that's the only choice then. But maybe it's not either or. Maybe it's actually all of the above. And maybe that's something to pay attention to and look for representatives, look for advocates who are looking at a complex problem through a complex lens instead of saying, it's just this or it's just that. Which one?
As the moderator, I fully intended to have no opinion shared, but I'm just going to share one thing that I think is really helpful to consider and to think about is the work and opportunity that we have to remove lethality from spaces where there is a likelihood for misunderstanding, right? And there are individuals in many circumstances, right? We're familiar with unconscious bias, whatever that unconscious bias might be, regardless of the line of difference or perhaps similarity that you might share with a person that may be behind a misunderstanding. And then when there are irreversible opportunities or opportunities for irreversible decisions, I think that is one space where anti-gun violence overlaps significantly with mental health advocacy. So it is 8 p.m. and we want to be respectful of your time. Thank you to each of you. Oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of it. Anna, you were going to close. Anna's going to close.
Thanks, everyone. First, I just wanted to say thank you to our panelists for sharing their stories and perspectives with all of us tonight. So can we give them all a big round of applause? And also just thank you to Casey for being our moderator and for the support of you all coming tonight to listen to this important conversation. We are a new group, so we're super excited that you are here and willing to listen. And definitely get involved by scanning the QR code on the pamphlet as you walk out, or if you already have it, you're welcome to email us at Hope. Just the Hope email is Students Demand Action. We also have some upcoming events that we wanted to invite students to. Next Tuesday, we actually are holding a letter writing event in the BSC. This is a great ramp onto activism. If you feel like you're not sure what to do, this is a really tangible way for you to get involved and write some notes to your legislators. We also have a collaboration event with STEP planned for later in March to talk about gun violence and intimate partner violence. And the overlaps of those things. So again, we just wanted to leave you with the thought that we as students, and our name implies we want to demand action, and we hope you leave today with a new perspective on activism and gun violence and feel empowered to take action in your community today. So thank you all for coming. You are welcome to leave now, but our panelists also will be here until 8:30. If anyone just wants to come ask them questions or just chat with one another, you're welcome to come up and interact with the panelists and each other. So thank you.